Welcome to This is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. I'm your host, Melissa Batchelor, and today we're going to be talking about 5 things the father teaches us about Alzheimer's disease. So a friend of mine recently reached out and asked me if I'd seen The Father yet with Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Coleman. And Anthony Hopkins just won the Oscar for Best Actor in a Leading Role. And I have to say, I agree with this win. The movie plot is about a daughter who's trying to provide care for her father, who's living with progressive memory loss, so some form of dementia. Here are some things that this film can teach us about providing care to a person living with Alzheimer's disease or a related dementia. You can also learn more by checking out my podcast, What Are the Stages of Alzheimer's Disease? Part 1, where I talk about mild and moderate stages of this disease, because that's really what the film portrays, even though it hints a little bit into late stage towards the end. So number one thing, misplacing or hiding valuables or commonly used items. So the father has several hiding places around the house where he hides his watch and other valuable items. And the caregivers know where all of his hiding places are, so they're able to redirect him so that he can find his watch when he's accusing other people of stealing. So he's suspicious and he's really fixated on his watch. And you never know why someone's going to fixate on a particular object or why it becomes so important to them. But rather than getting upset about it, you're better off just to address the underlying emotion, whether that's anxiety or worry, rather than getting into a fight with them about how they're wrong and no one stole their watch. Number 2, mood swings when they're confronted with a mentally or socially challenging situation. So in this film, the father has really angry and explosive outbursts with his caregivers. In fact, he's run off 3 in the film before we even get to the 4th one. And to manage this type of behavior, I'd recommend reviewing my podcast, 7 Tips for Managing Behaviors in Alzheimer's Disease, How to Manage Anger and Aggression, and How to Manage Repetitive Behaviors. But his behavior is being driven by the need to try to control the situation. And he's having trouble communicating with his words with his caregivers. So he's frustrated. And when his words don't work and you're experiencing brain failure, you're going to see angry, aggressive outbursts, because nonverbal behavior is really kind of his last resort at trying to be in control of that situation. Number 3, loss of orientation to time, place, and eventually to person. So I think it was a great play to have this character fixated on his watch. It's obvious, when the film starts that he's already disoriented to time and to place, because he believes that he's living in his own flat when it's actually his daughter's flat and he's been living there for years. And before the film ends, he isn't really sure who he is anymore and has forgotten his own name. And so his caregiver has to tell him what his name is. And by this point, he's been institutionalized. And so it's just a natural progression of the disease. You lose orientation to time first, then place, and then person. The only beef I have with this film is that the character doesn't have the functional losses that go along with the cognitive losses you see in this disease, meaning he's still able to physically walk and get around, but in real life, the memory loss and his inability, the loss of his ability to walk and to do things would go hand in hand. And these occur at different rates for different people. So number 4, personality and behavioral changes. So I've mentioned before, particularly in the moderate stages of Alzheimer's disease, you may see delusions, hallucinations, or suspiciousness. We just talked about the suspiciousness with his watch, but this film actually shows delusions and hallucinations in a way that I think is actually really helpful. So first, let's talk about the delusions. And a delusion is a firmly held false belief. So throughout the movie, the father insists that he's living in his own home, that nothing is wrong, and that he can take care of himself. And essentially, the underlying emotion here is that he's feeling a loss of control. And, he's very afraid that this deep-rooted part of himself to maintain his independence and autonomy is going to be taken away. And when a person has a delusion, no matter how much evidence you present to them to the contrary, you can't change their belief. So no matter how many times they say to him, this is, not your flat, that really just kind of created more antagonism than helped anything. But when I think it's natural for people to want to try to present these logical facts to try to help move someone off a delusion. And that's when you as a caregiver begin to have a logical conversation with an illogical person. And that could be very frustrating for everyone. And then also his hallucinations. And so in the film, they appear to be both visual and auditory. And hallucinations are either hearing, seeing, smelling, or feeling something that's not really there. And so one example is the night that he ends up out in the hallway and he hears a voice and he follows it. And number 5, the role of personality and sexuality. So I will tell you that this is an excellent depiction of what could happen to a person with brain failure. But if you've seen one person with dementia, you've seen one person, because so many aspects of this man's personality shine through. I mean, really the essence of who he was as a human being, but without the filter that he probably had when he was a younger person. So things from idealizing his younger daughter, making super cutting remarks to the older daughter, who's his caregiver, becoming very amorous and animated with a caregiver that the new caregiver that reminds him of someone he once knew. All of these things make up who he was as a person, and they're just kind of amplified, and he's not able to recognize the either appropriateness or inappropriateness of his behavior. So overall, I think this film is an excellent portrayal for this one man's journey through the slippery slope of Alzheimer's disease. I have a lot of other thoughts about the caregiver interactions, but I will save those for another podcast, because several of the interactions could have been handled differently that would have saved either or prevented or even modulated his behavior, but that's a beef for another day. Would like to extend my congratulations to Florian Zeller and Christopher Hampton for an amazing screenplay, and to Sir Anthony Hopkins for his Oscar nod. It was great also to see Olivia Williams again, because I still love her from Rushmore back in the day. And Olivia Coleman portrayed the very real emotional toll that this disease takes on family caregivers, and it impacts their entire life. So drop me a comment below if you have other thoughts on the film and its portrayal of dementia, and thank you for tuning in.